Back's good, hips good. India's where they're in the back, yeah. Doctor called Carney is amazing. No, I got back surgery in the world, and he's the one that does all the conventions and all the writes all the lectures and everything. He's amazing. Now I have a natural fusion.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's work session. Today is
good background there, David.
Monday, June the 7th, 2021. Time is now 5:01 p.m. The work session of the City of Council of the City of Trinidad will now come to order. Tonight we have a couple of items to discuss. One is the Fox Theater Rehabilitation Proposal Consideration, which is going to be, I think, a virtual, I believe, by the people who are going to give us a presentation. And item two are the incentives that we've had some discussion on in the past, and I think Mr. Valentine, of course, we did get some information in our drive, so let's go ahead and get started with the Fox Theater Rehabilitation Proposal Consideration. Mr. Valentine, what do you have?
Actually, I'm hoping everybody can hear us. Audra, can you confirm? I see nodding heads, so thank you. Actually, this is a presentation by Gregory Friesen from CSNA Architects, and I'll just let it go from there because I can't even talk. He's got a presentation on the Fox and the whole conservation easement and requirements that we have there, but it's and we've got a few of our boards and commissions on here just so they can see the presentation as well. So,
Okay.
Gregory?
Thank you, Mike. Audra, are you going to be able to launch the presentation?
I'm starting it right now. Okay. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mike, for the invitation to make this presentation tonight. As Mike mentioned, my name is Gregory Friesen. I'm the principal architect for CSNA Architects in Colorado Springs. What you're about to see is I am not the sole author of this work. My colleague Taylor has been working with me on this. You can see her there. And in addition, for about the past 2 years, we've been working with an exceptional team of consultants and people who are extremely knowledgeable about all things theater and historic theater from around the country. So some of the things you'll see here tonight are the result of their participation as well. We can go to the next one. So just so you know, this should go about 30-35 minutes. It sounds like it's a long time. I think it will seem quicker than that. So please don't jump off and read your email while we're going through this. It should be interesting. Here's our project objectives. We need to receive a certificate of occupancy. That's a kind of a legal document that will be issued by the City of Trinidad building official that says, this building is safe. You can start holding public events in there again. That's our primary objective. We also want to reestablish this theater as a vibrant community center. And we say community center because it will have multiple uses when the project is finished. That's our goal. And it will be able to be used in multiple ways concurrently at the same time. We have to ensure its economic feasibility.
We're beginning to lose a little bit of audio. Can you, I'm not sure if it's your audio or what.
Is this any better?
No. At first you were very clear and then all of a sudden it drifted.
Well, I think once.
My audio is on its loudest setting. Is this any better?
No,
Not, no,
How about this?
no.
no.
It's weird, because it was good.
Okay, so then let me try this. Is this any better?
No.
No.
Have I been muted on your end?
No.
You're not muted, the volume just went way low.
Well, I have my volume on as loud as I can.
Gregory, would you be able to call into the Zoom?
Let me, Audra, I'm going to try.
There you go.
There you go.
That's good.
This is better now?
Yes.
Yes.
It is.
Well, how strange. So what was the last part that you all heard?
Just that you were,
Vibrant community center.
Okay, so we're trying to develop this so it can be used in multiple ways, all at the same time. So that'll be interesting. We must ensure it's economically feasible. It has to pay its own way. It has to earn income, since it's a City of Trinidad building. It has to earn income. It has to contribute to your tax base. We talked about multiple uses, and of course, we want to protect the historic resource. This is a loved building. It's important, not only for your city, county, and the state of Colorado, but nationally. This is a very significant building. So those are our objectives. Okay, next. So these are some of the issues we're going to talk about. I'm not going to read through all of these right now. We have occupancy issues, historic preservation issues. It's part of the Heritage Energy Pilot Program. This is an honor for the City of Trinidad for this building to be one of 3 historic buildings around the state to be in this first ever Heritage Energy Pilot Program, which is how do you bring energy efficiency to some of these old buildings. And then we have some other issues. It has to be pleasant when you come. You have to be able to chat with your friends before an event, things like that. We'll go through those with a lot of visuals and not a lot of reading. Okay, next. So here's a 3D model. We built the 3D model, computer model of the building. This is what it looks like today, if it was all gray and a computer model. Okay, next. So this building will need an addition, and we're going to walk through why an addition must be made to this building. But when we do an addition, what this light-colored blue is showing, let's separate the new addition from the building. And if we can do it in a way that light, natural daylight during the day, flows through windows and skylights, and at night, we can light up the west face of this building.
we're losing your voice again.
I am going to try to call it. Yeah, call you guys just to call in. Sometimes with computer audio doesn't work as well.
You're back now.
That was mine.
Mine
Oh.
pride.
That was someone else.
Yes, it was. My mistake.
Okay, hold on.
still having July, that's a miracle, because they canceled June. So
Oh, so now we have another.
He needs to mute his computer.
Gregory, mute your computer if you can.
Gregory, can you hear us?
Yep. Every 2 years for the city council, that was it. That's too much. I have to do some fundraising at the first event they set up in the entertainment district. No one else has done it but me. I will help them out. And I told them I'll be the truck guy.
How about now?
There you go.
There you go.
That is? Well, I apologize for the technical difficulty. What you heard when you couldn't hear me speaking was that all approvals have been granted and the project's fully funded.
That's good to know.
Okay, so should I start over with this slide?
Yes.
Okay, so this building will need an addition, and we're going to walk you through that here in a bit. But when we add on to it, it's important to protect its integrity. And by the way, that addition has to go between the building and what we'll call the Great Wall of Safeway, which is just to the west. So it's a slender piece of land, and we have a lot of things that need to go in there. But when we add on to it, what this light blue is showing is we would like there to be some air, some light in between the addition and this existing building. So during the day, natural light is streaming in. At night, when you come for a show, for the big show, at the production, etc., we can light up the west wall of the theater, and it contributes to the excitement of arrival. Okay, next. Okay, so let's go through air handling systems, heating and air conditioning. When you go in this building, it seems like, wow, there's a lot of space in this building, but not really. What you see here is it looks like a little bit of a shoe, a gray shoe, connected by a green and a blue squiggle. Imagine that gray shoe is a minivan. And that's the air handler for the stage and the fly loft. We need to add this new air handler, and it's kind of ghosted in. We think we can fit that in to the carbuncle, that little addition that's on the northwest part of this building. The blue shows the supply air that will go into the stage at the northwest corner, rise up, go all the way to the top, where it clears the gridiron and all the walking gantries at the very top of the stage, and the air will fall down naturally, and then the green shows how it will return through openings, grills, in the stage floor along the north wall. So that's the air handling unit needed for the stage and fly loft. Why its own unit? Because the fire code will require us to have a new fire curtain. In the event of a fire, that fire curtain will drop, and we want to separate air from the stage from air in the auditorium itself. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the air handling unit for the theater auditorium. Now this, right now, you can see that gray shape. That's a little bit larger than a minivan. That's almost the size of a tractor trailer that you see driving down the highway. this is high. This is high up in the air. And it's high because we want to push the air, which are the blue ducts represented here, in the attic space that's above the auditorium ceiling and below the roof. We can't put this air handling unit in the attic itself because it's very heavy. The original building was never designed to carry the weight of something like this. It's loud, so we want to be able to keep it outside of the auditorium. It's going to vibrate. So we have to isolate the vibration from all the fans and the motors in this air handling unit from not taking away from the theater experience. So the air comes in through the blue ducts. Again, it drops. The green, it's a little bit hard to see here, but the air will drop and it will fall down the slope of the seating. If you've been in the theater, the floor slopes down to the stage. The air will come down, it will drop, and it will naturally fall, cascade down to the front of the stage where there will be grills there where we'll pull that air out, take it outside the building, up and back to the air handler. And then we'll reuse that air over and over with economizers and energy efficiency devices. So that's the air handler for the theater. Okay, next. Well, we also have to provide heating and air conditioning for the ballroom. By the way, this is a spectacular resource. If you've toured the theater recently and you've been down there and it seems kind of spooky and junky, wait until it's restored to its original splendor. It's going to be a remarkable resource for the city of Trinidad. Well, we have an air handler that's outside the building again. Because there's been water damage in the past to the floor of the ballroom, we need to replace that flooring and possibly some of the structural supports carrying the floor. So for the ballroom, we want to push the ducts underneath the ballroom floor. That's so that we protect that magnificent pressed tin ceiling with its remarkable cornices. We want to keep that in pristine shape, not hang ducts or run ducts across there. So we're bringing the air underneath the floor, pushing it up, the air handling unit. It's going to be pulled across the ballroom to the front of the ballroom, which is the north side. You can see from the green duct there, high up on the wall in the northwest corner of the ballroom, pick that air up, pull it back in, and recycle it through this air handler. So that's the air handler for the ballroom. By the way, this is about the same size as the semi-trailer as well. That's how much air we need to move to meet current code. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we're kind of to a shoe-shaped one. This is a minivan-sized air handler. This one is for the two retail bays at the front. You don't want to put any on one of these machines up on the roof. They're big. You'll be able to see them, especially since Trinidad is a city with topography and you can be high up in the city and look down here. You want to keep that roof clear of these type of machines. So this will provide supply and return air that's heating and cooling to the two original retail bays so that those can be leased out. And beneath each one of those retail bays on the ballroom level are two rooms, and our plan for those is to convert those to conference rooms so those can be rented out for conferences. They will make amazingly beautiful conference rooms. The pressed tin ceilings in there are intact. There's a slight curve to the wall. Furnish it appropriately. Get technology, flat screens. Those will be amazing, amazing venues that will help you earn some money. Okay, so next slide. Okay, we have the next one, Audra. use Audra now?
No, I believe it advanced. Are we not on? Let me advance some more and see if that's where we're looking. That one?
So my screen is frozen on retail days. Oh. So we just had lightning here trying to reconnect.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Greg is the.
He's in Colorado. He should be solid.
They said they're having a storm, he just had lightning strike and lost his internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
Really.
We take it off the list.
That doesn't.
It's a whole different.
Yeah.
It's like you're being in another planet.
That block.
I'm gonna ask you if these ventilation filters can effectively capture SARS and COVID.
Okay, so apparently I need to restart my computer. How about this?
We can hear you.
I'll try and join from my, what?
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me, but you can't see the, or can you see, is the slide advancing?
Yes.
You can see the screen.
So what we have, Gregory, is the overall air handling system of all units.
Okay, so what I am going to try and do is, follow you from, right now I will follow you from memory until I can restart my computer and follow it. Okay, so if this is all the units, I think this is pretty impressive because it just shows, it demonstrates that in order to meet current building code and to satisfy some of the requirements given to us by your own fire marshal and your own building inspector there at the city, who are, place life safety paramount in their concern. This is the kind of system that we have to introduce somewhere in the building, and we're showing it outside in order to make it work. Okay, next one. And tell me what that one is, please.
That is a brownish tower toward the front that has a red,
It's the ADA access to all levels.
oh yeah.
Okay, so Colorado Preservation Inc., who is on the phone with us or in their presentation, they have an easement, a conservation easement on the building. And one of the allowed uses that's in the easement is, quote, elevator, unquote. Okay, so part of what this presentation is about is to understand if elevator only means elevator, or if it means elevator and anything that's technical that's needed in order to make this building viable, which includes all the air handling units we just looked at. So think about this, think about the theater. We have the ballroom at the basement. There's a level that's a half level up between the ballroom and the lobby. There is the lower lobby in front of the theater. There are the storefronts. There is the lower balcony, and there's the upper balcony. So there's at least 6 levels that need to be connected in order to comply with ADA. Okay, let's go to the next one, please. tell me what that one is.
Occupancy issues need at least one fully compliant egress stair.
Okay, so this comes to us from a national code consultant. And the local team member of that national consulting team used to be the director of the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department. So we're fortunate that we have someone that knowledgeable who's right here in our own backyard. So when you look at the building, there are two fire escapes, one on the east and one on the west. Right now, you've seen scaffolding going up. And when that scaffolding goes up, we're going to look at the anchors to make sure that those fire escapes are securely anchored to the wall and make repairs if they are not, so that they are. That notwithstanding, even though we do have those two exterior fire escapes, the dimension, the height of each one of the treads, and the width or length of each one of the rises where you put your foot do not meet current code. Neither do the opening in the railings. None of that meets code. We can keep them, we can bring them back to service and use them in a pinch, but we must have one fully code compliant stair tower that can be the primary access or means of egress in case of a fire if those current fire escapes are blocked or for whatever reason they just can't be used. So now we've got two towers. We have the elevator tower and we have the stair tower. Okay, so next slide, please.
Gregory, this is showing the pre-function space.
Is this remind me, Taylor, is this the existing pre-function?
No, the addition, the new.
Okay, so it's the cutaway of the floor?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so when you enter the current building, you go through the vestibule, and then the floor ramps down. And it's a steep ramp, and it doesn't comply with federal civil rights legislation, which is the American with Disabilities Act. And it's also narrow, and we're going to see that here in a bit. So we think that we need a new pre-function space, or more clearly stated, another pre-function space. This is where when you're going to see a play, a musical performance or whatever, you hang out before the performance. If there's an intermission, you hang out here before you go back. And after, you linger and chat with your friends, decide where you're going to go in Trinidad for a meal or a drink, and then you go on your way. Next slide, please.
No, this is the artist in residence program, the first level of that.
Okay, so above the pre-function space would be an artist in a resident single bedroom apartment. And if you go to the next slide, I think there's another single bedroom apartment. Why are these important? These are important for two reasons. What we know nationally is that in order to attract talent and get people to relocate from wherever they are around the country to come here in Trinidad, if they're going to be the theater manager, most likely they'll have a hard time finding affordable housing. And in particular, to get nationally recognized artists in residence that will really elevate the stature of this theater in the theater world. There's an artist in residence apartment for the same reason. Think of all the articles we've read about how hard it is for folks in the Colorado ski towns to find affordable housing for their people. These two apartments will help us address that. And by the way, there are funding sources restrictions set out in your zoning ordinance for the historic zone. It is showing the separation between the existing theater and the new one, and it's showing that the tall part of the addition is in line with the south face of the auditorium where the building steps up. Okay, next one.
Occupancy issues, ADA access to all levels.
Okay, and what is the visual? I can't even log on to my computer now.
The elevator is
So-
circled.
And the area in front. The flat area in front of the elevator is also circled, right?
Yep.
It's a difference. Okay.
Okay, so I'm opening, okay. Hold on, I'm opening the email on my phone that I sent to you earlier, Mike and Audra. There we go. I'll do it this way. Always have backup for your technology. Okay, so this, again, for the ADA, this is showing the elevator tower, and what's circled down below is a code-compliant ramp. It's kind of hard to see that with a little bit of a stair. So all we're saying here is that when we provide ADA access, it's more than an elevator. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is modern pre-function spaces. So in the upper left is an excerpt from the building code. And what that tells us is that for assembly spaces, that's where people meet and gather. If they are standing around, if they're not sitting in a chair, if they're not sitting in a chair at a dining table, then we need to figure that each person will occupy 5 square feet. So on the center image is the main floor of the theater. And all those blue circles, those light blue circles, each one of those circles is 5 square feet. Okay. So what that is showing is that if you are in those circles, you're standing literally front to back, shoulder to shoulder with other people. And for the main floor of the theater, 130 people could stand in there, jam-packed. Now, we would never stand like this. This is like being on a subway platform at the height of rush hour. It's not a pleasant experience. There's 360 seats on the main floor of the theater. So if everyone was to be packed in like a subway platform, that's only 36% of the people coming to see a show that could stand around before, during, and after the theater. When we go to the first balcony, and we have to include this, because remember, one of the things that makes this theater remarkable in the state of Colorado is that it's the only historic theater with 2 balconies. So we need to return at least one of those balconies to service. And what the blue circles show there is we can only get space for 16 people. When you add these together, there are 146 blue circles representing 146 people, but there's 610 seats. So the maximum pre-function capacity of this theater is 24%. Maybe someone will go to a theater performance, but the likelihood is they're not going to come back because there's not enough space for them to engage in the kind of social interaction, chatting with their friends before and after a show that we take for granted. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide shows a floor plan to the left. This is underneath that, tower. You can make out the elevator, that's the small square. You can make out the stair that's up at the top of that addition, and you can make out some more blue circles. Well, when we add those, we can get 284 people in here, packed like sardines for 610 seats. That's a 47% pre-function capacity. And what this tells us is it's still not enough. We need further study to the pre-function level that's at the ballroom level or the basement that would be below this one. So we really need even more pre-function space. So on the next slide, which is new entry, that's showing that, if you remember the slides we just looked at, if you have 500 people that are coming here for a show, it's going to be really hard for them to all wiggle and shove and push their way through the current theater lobby. We need to give them a second way to come in. And that's what this little addition is showing. The next slide, if you see that one, and let me know when you get there.
We see.
Do you see the two? Okay, the two red ovals. That's showing, the first one shows, we can, over the entry, have used the roof as a terrace. And that's in the covenant for the building, although I think when the covenant was granted, they intended it to be the low roof immediately to the right, which we can say with some certainty was never structured to carry the load of roof pavers and people. So we're having a little bit of a roof terrace above the new entry, which can work in spring, summer, fall, but not in winter. And then the other circle are the windows in the pre-function space we just talked about. Okay, so I think we've talked enough about the pre-function and social aspect. Let's go to the next slide. This is Heritage Energy Pilot Program. And congratulations, we're very happy that this theater is part of that program. Here's the challenge for providing energy efficiency improvements to this theater. When you go in to the auditorium, we're not able to insulate the walls because they're all behind beautiful plaster moldings and decorative walls and ceilings. So we can't add insulation there. On the tall stage fly loft, we really can't add insulation there because this stage has been proclaimed by one of our historic stage consultants who works not only all across the United States, but throughout Europe, has declared this one of the most important intact stages that she's ever seen. So we don't want to go in there and attach metal studs to the inside of that fly tower and insulation and sheetrock. What we can do is work on energy improvement on the roof itself, and what these green rectangles are showing is add some solar panels. And so we're working with the Heritage Energy Pilot folks in the Colorado Department of Energy to explore that. And I think that's pretty exciting. This not only allows us to bring this theater into the 21st century, but also, in addition to all the new air handling systems, provide some solar energy. Enough about that one for now. Next slide, historic preservation issues. This is an early photo of the building, and it is the intent of the project team, with the consent of you on City Council and other folks, decision makers in the city, to restore this to the original Wrap and Wrap street facade. Now, let me make some remarks about why that is important without belaboring the point. For those who are in the theater world, particularly the designers, the planners, the decorators, the acousticians, the theater people who know about the history of the American theater, the Wrap and Wrap everyone knows the Rappin' Rap. But here's the thing. They all know the Rappin' Rap brothers in Chicago. This theater was designed by the Trinidad Rappin' Raps. Through meticulous and careful scholarship, we've been able to determine with a degree of certainty that it was the Trinidad Rappin' Raps, not the Chicago Rappin' Raps, that actually completed the first Rappin' Rap theater in the country. In fact, this one provided suggestions and inspiration to their Chicago brothers, who went on to become much more famous. So this is a remarkable historic artifact. This is, well, I just said it, the first Rappin' Rap theater in the country. And we're so confident of this, we declared so publicly at a Colorado Preservation Inc. conference this spring. We stated it publicly to an Urban Land Institute presentation, to the Colorado Springs Historic Preservation Alliance. We're confident this is the first building. So what makes it significant is the fact that this is the first Rappin' Rap theater completed by the famous Rappin' Rap architects. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Please be proud of how significant this building is. So the next one shows the addition attached to the original Rappin' Rap facade. Okay, next slide, please. This one, you can make out the current marquee, which was added in 1935, when the Fox people came in and turned this into the Fox Theater. A trend that occurred across the country from Peoria to San Diego. A lot of old theaters were converted to movie houses. All of them ended up having some kind of Fox marquee. This one is no different. The next slide, please. This one shows the true original marquee, which is not what is there today. And I say it's the true original because you can see on the front it says West in vertical letters. You can kind of make out some angle tie rods bracing this to the building. If you were to step out after the session and go look at the theater now, the part that says West, it doesn't say West anymore, and there's a little red box that's kind of stuck on the top of the marquee, and it's tied down with guy wires that says Fox. So what about this marquee? Next slide, please. On the left is an excerpt from one of the original construction drawings for this theater. And we're very lucky to have these drawings available to us. To the right, you can see two photos. And the center one, you can see the framing. That was added at the time of the marquee. They took this vaulted entry, dropped a ceiling in it, concealed the archway so they could have the new vestibule. And when you walk through the theater today, that's the vestibule you experience, the 1935 one, not the original. The photo on the right, that is a photo looking out towards the marquee. So where you see the wood framing there, the wood studs, that's kind of the back of the marquee. And all the electrical work, that includes the transformer and the wiring that went to the neon lights. Now if you look really closely at the right photo, kind of at the right edge, you see those red and green swirls. And then on top of that, you can see some expanded metal, kind of some metal lath. Well, what that shows us is that plaster, ornamental plaster, was strobe effect. But when we look at this, and other members of our team look at this, great care has been taken to protect that molding. You can see the lath at the top has been folded over, which, when looking at similar interventions on other historic buildings, leads us to believe that the people that were asked to do this weren't fully on board. They really don't want to do this. That's why they took great care, so at some point in an indeterminate future, it could be brought back. Let's go to the next slide. On the left, through an opening in the new vestibule ceiling is a hole, and you can see the wiring. More importantly, you can see char, which is evidence that a fire once occurred inside this marquee. We don't know if it was ever called in. We don't know if anyone ever even knew that there was a fire. But there is structural damage to the framing of this marquee as evidenced by this burnt wood. And on the right, you can see the fox, little box fox. You don't see the west projection that would be outside with the west, the words west vertically. And you can see some of the almost like clothesline wire that they've used to anchor that red fox back to the base. So let's go to the next slide, please. On the left is a stamped, and this is significant, they don't usually do this, a stamped letter, review letter from a structural engineer who was just down there last week. So here's what we know, and these are the highlights on the right. The marquee was built in place. They didn't pick it out of a catalog, it wasn't shipped by truck or train and raised up and hung on the building as all of one thing. It was built in place. It's been subjected to fire. The metal panels that make up what we see as the marquee will need to be removed to inspect the extent of the damage. The wood framing will need to be replaced. It's been burned. Basically, what we see as the marquee will need to be deconstructed and moved off-site for repairs. The wood framing and substructure will need to be replaced. New anchoring connecting it to the structure will need to be installed. What's there now is workable. The structural engineer, in a phone conversation after his inspection, said he would invite anyone who wishes to do so to stand on that marquee. He will decline his own invitation to do so. There's no way we'll get him to stand on the roof of this marquee. So what we see is the marquee will need to be completely reconstructed, removed, repaired, reframed, re-anchored, reinstalled. Next slide. So this is a suggestion, and we're glad that we have so many friends from review agencies who are joining the conversation tonight, because we're going to need their help to figure this out. What we're suggesting is, if we have to take that marquee down because it needs to be essentially completely rebuilt, when it's reinstalled, let's reinstall it on the new entry. That allows us to restore the existing theater to its wrap and wrap appearance, which is what makes it significant as the first wrap and wrap theater in the country. The next slide shows that an option, were we to be able to do this, we might be able to do Art Deco or diner style aluminum strip siding that really celebrate the Art Deco nature of the marquee. So next slide. This is just a recap of what we've talked about. Reinventing the theater for the 21st century with multi-purpose venues. Things can be held in the pre-function lobby, art sales, craft sales, Christmas craft sales, Girl Scout cookie sales. A lot of things could be rented out just in the pre-function open lobby. The theater can be rented out. The ballroom can be rented out. We've talked about taking 2 rooms, and who knows how they've been used in the past for a lot of storage, turning those into pretty fabulous meeting rooms and a rooftop function terrace. In addition to which, there are 2 retail bays and some housing. So this truly is a multi-purpose community center building. Next slide. This is a summary. I'll check these things off. So we've talked about a code compliant HVAC system, ADA, at least 1 fully compliant egress stair. We didn't talk about an all-new main electrical system, but we'll need one. For historic preservation issues, we're very mindful that we want to protect, rehabilitate, and restore the historic character of the theater itself. To do so, for the addition, we want to separate the addition from the existing building so we're not slamming something against it. We think it's going to be historically compatible, and we will get assistance from reviews provided, as I've just mentioned, from all of our friends in the review agencies to make sure that is true. The marquee, we have some questions about that. For the Heritage Energy Pilot Program, we'll have new roof insulation. All lighting, when it's restored, will be LED lighting, but it's going to look period appropriate. Code will require it to be LED. We can add solar energy panels. Other things we've talked about, modern pre-function space, housing, compliant with your zoning ordinance, and compliant with the International Building Code exterior windows on the addition. That summarizes our presentation. Are there any questions or any discussion? If there are any questions, we'll try to answer them. If there's any discussion, we're happy to facilitate or just be quiet and listen.
Let's go ahead and get some comments or questions from council, starting with Mr. Goodall. Anything?
Oh, it looks amazing, and just, I will be happy when funding starts rolling in and this project really gets going. It's exciting seeing the scaffolding up, and I think a lot of comments around town, people are excited to see something finally happening with the theater. I like what I see.
Mr. Bond.
That was a great presentation, sir. I had a question for you. Does this air handling system you're talking about, does it capture the COVID-19 viral particulates with the use of ventilation filters?
Yes, it will. I've actually installed some of those. It's a bipolar, it's called a bipolar filtration unit. I've actually installed those in my own studio building so that the people who work for CSNA architects are protected. They're not that expensive. Everyone should be doing it if they can. And yes, we will have those kind of filters in this new system.
Thank you.
Ms. Griego.
Well, when you're talking about the building, the new building attached to the original structure, you're talking about a lot of people, 610. Is that overestimating the occupancy of that building for the size of the community?
That's the 610 is the number of existing seats, original seats that are already there.
Right.
And what the building code will require us to do, and the fire code and other codes that will come into play, if there are 610 seats, they will require us to plan the renovation of this building as though there will be 610 people coming there for an event.
Okay. So on the pre-function area that we're talking about that has to be built for code, in your opinion, could we save money by not building out that area until it's needed, or it's a necessity to do it now?
You know, it's a really good question, and it's kind of almost a chicken and egg thing, but not really. If you remember the first diagram, it showed the number of blue circles that could be fit into the existing lobby, as though people were absolutely jam-packed. And it's a small fraction of the percentage of people that could actually sit in the theater for an event. We just believe strongly that unless there is additional pre-function space, people may come to one event, but they're not going to come back because they're not going to remember the beautifully restored interior. They're not going to remember the acoustics that have been acclaimed by people who have performed there, both using amplified music and natural non-amplified music. People have proclaimed the acoustics of this theater to just be spectacular. They're not going to remember that. What they're going to remember is, wow, what a terrible experience that was. You know, to be jam-packed, and the lobby was so full, I had to stand out in the sidewalk, and it was cold, and yeah, we did our bit. I'm glad that the city restored it, but gee, I'm never going to go back there. So we really think that we do need to provide this space so that people will be comfortable, it will be enjoyable, it will be code compliant.
Okay, I have one.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. In the theater area that's up on display now, the actual theater, there's some gorgeous light fixtures in there. Will those be able to be restored and reused using modern technology?
Yes, ma'am. What in our profession we describe that as relamping. We take the light fixture, we'll remove the original electric bulbs. We will find LED lamps or bulbs that can look like the original bulbs, but they have a light emitting diode, which is what LED means, light emitting diode. That will be brighter, it can be dimmed, and our intent is that as we determine that the light fixtures that you see there are in fact original, they will be restored and they will be relamped. But know that we will add to those additional light fixtures, and in the ceiling they're going to look like 2-inch round things on the ceiling that are lamps, so that we can meet the International Illumination Engineering Society recommendations and the International Electrical Code requirements for the number of foot candles that must be provided to adequately light the space. Yes, we will keep and reuse the existing light fixtures, but in addition, we will add new ones. They will be small, they will be graceful, and they will not detract.
Thank you. Somebody just chatted a question, and it was my question as well. What is the dimensions of the new addition?
Oh, Taylor, do you have the model up?
I'm trying to pull it up right now, but to give you guys a reference, I can try to share my screen.
Just an
It's
approximate.
Maybe
going on
25
top.
feet. That's maybe 25 feet wide by 60 feet long. It's small. That whole addition is 10,000 square feet,
Okay.
which is fairly small, but it's on like 5 levels.
Okay.
The new west wall of the addition, the wall for the elevator, and the west wall of the stair can be on the property line. The building code does not allow us to have windows on the property line. In order to have windows from the property line. So in the concept suggestion that we just presented to you, if it's not the west wall of the stair or the west wall of the elevator, the rest of the wall that has windows is 5 feet 1 inch from the property line. So give us 1 inch of wiggle room if the general contractor messes up laying out the building, and they're frequently at least an inch off. So we want to be 5 feet 1 inch, so when it's built, we know we're at least 5 feet off the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ogletree.
Mr. Friesen, that was an excellent presentation, incredibly fascinating and thorough. I get more and more excited about this project every time I learn more about it. I had a couple of questions. One, to follow up on Councilwoman Griego's question about capacity. You didn't talk about modernization that might be planned for the seating area, because I've sat in those seats. They are not very comfortable. And I don't know if that's required from a historic preservation to retain those seats, but I think modern theater goers are going to expect something more comfortable and wider. And so it could be that the ultimate capacity is less than 610. But I wondered what your thinking was on that.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's good to hear that you've tried the seats out and that you don't find them very comfortable. We've also heard from other people who have sat in those seats that they are not that uncomfortable. They do, the sled, the bottom of the part where you sit on, the sled in the back, they kind of have a reclining function to them. So when you sit in them, the back pushes back, which makes them a little more comfortable than if they were just stiff, straight up backs. Now, let's chat just briefly about replacement of the seats. That's a fairly nuanced as well as technical discussion, and that will involve careful conversation and collaboration with our friends in the review agencies. Because what we want to make sure is when we say, yes, we're going to preserve the historic character of the theater, well, what is it that actually contributes to, quote, the historic character, unquote? We can all think about the wonderful painted backdrops, the detailed decoration, the moldings, the plastered walls and ceilings, the light fixtures, the stage, the dramatic volume of the auditorium itself. But the seats can contribute to the historic character, and we know, and some of the folks on this phone call or in this Zoom session also know that some historic theaters have replaced all the seats. And we have to determine if that's something that is advisable. If we can't replace all of them, can we replace some of them? So while that seems like it's an easy decision to make, it's really not. It's really
And I assume it's very costly too, to replace them. Are they the original seats that are in there right now?
Chris Smith would be your local expert on that, and I think these were replaced. Chris, if you're on the phone or on the Zoom, can you unmute and chime in? I guess he's not. I'm surprised. No, there are some older ones that we have seen in the basement.
I'm just thinking, I think your concern about people being stuffed in there and that their discomfort about that is a valid concern. But I also think people who are in uncomfortable, close seating, that's also going to be a negative that would affect whether people want to return. People in this day and age don't, yeah, I mean, we have theaters now that have basically recliners and they bring you food. So, you know, I know that's not what we're headed for, but I think that there's some nod that has to be to the fact that people are larger now,
There you go.
just typically.
That's where I was going. People are not the same size today as they were.
So I think I'm just gonna be curious to watch how you resolve that.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. We're probably not going to go for vibrating, reclining, big gulp chairs.
Dang it.
But, you know, when we talk about code compliance, the width of the aisles, the knee space from the front of those existing seats to the back of the one in front of you, those do not meet code. And if you're in the middle of one of those rows of seats, and there is some kind of event that requires you to leave the theater auditorium quickly, it can be a problem if you don't have leg room, if you have to shimmy sideways all the way down the aisle. So replacing the seats or not replacing the seats, there is, you know, an historical issue, there's a code compliant issue, there's the comfort issue. It will require a lot of discussion. And frankly, it may come down to, we started the presentation by saying the first thing we need is a certificate of occupancy. It may come down to your own fire marshal and city building inspector saying, yeah, good job guys, but all the seats must comply with National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, and there's like 25 volumes of those. Must comply with the fire code, must comply with the building code. So it could be a case where code and certificate of occupancy takes precedence over wanting to keep them because they've been there for a while. We just have not explored that issue in sufficient detail with the right team of people in the discussion to be able to make a recommendation at this point.
Okay.
Gregory, this is Audra. For the record, Chris Smith did chime in and say the original seats are only in the first 2 rows of the first balcony. The main floor of the auditorium are seats from the 1940s.
Well, there you go. So that all ties to period of significance. And like I said, I don't want to get too weedy about this, but it's, you know, it will be a robust discussion.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mr. Shu?
Well, thanks for sharing, everyone there, your impressions of the existing seats.
This is Phil, and I do have a question. One of the things that you mentioned, that the current seating does not meet code, like I said, if people have to try to get out from behind the seats to, in a hurry, or, you know, just to go get popcorn or whatever, would there be a chance of maybe moving those seat rows? I know it would lose some seat capacity, but maybe move those seats back to allow for seating, and have that knee room more spacious. I know we would lose seating, but at the same time, we would allow for more comfort.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so that's a very excellent suggestion. And yes, it's technically feasible, and that would be one of the options available to us, and we'd want to explore it. But that's all part of the, you know, do we have to keep them all and by keeping them all as they are from the 1940s renovation, does that align with what's called the period of significance? Does it comply with code, etc.? If we can remove rows of seats and increase the dimension, the walking space, that could be an option. But again, you know, it has to be the result of an informed and careful discussion. and as I said, your own fire marshal and building official may say, no certificate of occupancy until the aisles between the seats fully comply with code. After all, we're spending a lot of money on a fully compliant heating and cooling system, a fully compliant and illuminated fire egress system, a fully code compliant electrical system, a fully code compliant stair tower, a fully code compliant and federal civil rights compliant ADA elevator. That sounds like it's a thing.
Okay. Next question I have is, the addition that's going to handle or have all of the new air conditioning units that are in there, you said they're quite big and quite noisy. Are they going to create any noise quality to the exterior of the building that would interfere with people walking by?
No, when I say they're noisy if they are mounted on the ceiling above, say, the theater or auditorium. So it's actually advantageous, in addition to being absolutely essential to even having them, for them to be in the new edition. Because if you remember in the diagram, we had the blue ducts, diagrammatic ducts showing the path of the air from them into the building. At a certain point, those are what we call acoustic boots. They will be flexible ductwork so that any vibration in the ducts will be taken up by these sections of flexible duct connecting them. There will also be duct liners that will be inside the ducts that will dampen acoustic noise. And as far as being on the outside, if you're walking by wondering what this hum is, if you can hear it over car traffic on the street or the highway, the only sound that will come through will be in the grills, the louvers in the exterior wall that allow for the air to come in. So no sound migrating out through those. But in the louvers for the relief air, once the air has been brought into the theater, brought back to the air handler, recycled the maximum number of times, and then ejected so that we can continue to replenish fresh air, it will be an opening, and it could be 8 feet by 8 feet at the largest, through a grill in the exterior wall, that there are ways to provide acoustic attenuation for those as well.
The last thing is I just wanted to reemphasize that we're talking about comfort, and I think that that is something that it sounds like we've heard from a couple of our council people tonight. If there was any way that we could create comfort, capacity, and capacity at the same time, because if people are not going to want to come back because they are not comfortable, then we're going to be losing in the long run. So I think that whoever group has to make these decisions takes really careful, be very careful in making that decision. That we create comfort for people that want to come and be part of an experience. With that, Mr. Valentine, do you have any questions?
So, Gregory, kind of a statement. I don't know if I heard you mention restrooms at the levels, but the ADA, the elevator, all that was part of the overall discussion from the beginning, correct?
Yes, it is, and we didn't show any slides of the restrooms because that's kind of a study in itself. Then we have a request into the council to provide some funding that will let us to undertake that study. We know we have the theater, auditorium, and at least one balcony. All those people are going to want to have access to toilets and sinks. The building code will say that if we have 610 seats, and the discussion that we just had will help us because maybe there's 400 seats by the time we have code compliant aisles. If there's 400 seats, we go straight to the plumbing code and the building code that has a chart, a table that tells us how many toilets are needed for those people. From our own experience, we know that we cannot use the code as a design guide. Whatever the code tells us is the number of fixtures we need. We tend to find that we'll probably need up to double those because, in an intermission, you have a large number of people that have a short amount of time to use those. That's its own kind of study. For the ballroom, if you're booking an event in the ballroom and also having a musical performance in the theater, those are two different populations that have a requirement to access toilets and sinks. Well, are those separate facilities? If they're not separate, they're shared facilities because it may seem that it's more economical that they share, and both events are ticketed. How do you monitor who bought a ticket to one event and ends up going to the other event? So there will be new toilet rooms. They will be fully code compliant. From our own experience working on hotel and event center projects, their number will be more than the code requires, but the code is a minimum compliance document. It's just saying, at a minimum, you have to do this. So, at a minimum, we will meet with code, but from practical experience, we know that there will be more than what the code requires. And those will most likely be part of that new addition. There were 2 floors that we didn't talk about in that new addition because those are kind of being reserved as possible locations for toilet facilities.
Thank you.
I do have one more question. I think we have heard an estimate of what the cost of this project would be, somewhere in the $18-19 million range. And that is probably at today's figures. Is there a contingency built into that figure at this point in time? Because as you know, materials, the way they're going, codes change as time goes on. So what are you doing to build in contingencies to take into consideration? Because we know this is going to be a multi-year process or building process.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. So the, I think $18 million allowance or project budget was established last year. Since then, we've had 1 year of escalation. But first, before I talk to escalation, let me get to your first question. Yes, the budget includes both project contingency and owner's contingency. As you know, for every project, the owner should hold their own contingency for project unknowns and only authorize the owner's contingency to be spent on the project with your consent for things that might not have been foreseen by the general contractor when they bid the project or from the entire design team when they designed it. So there will be contingencies. In addition, the estimated cost of the building will go up year by year to account for escalation. In years past, costs were pretty steady. We could say 2%, 2.5%. The past couple of years, we've been at 4%. The most recent national cost indexes that I've seen show that 6% for this year is probably a reasonable escalation. If it's 6% again next year, the cost will need to be adjusted. So we do have a table showing $18 million, which then after 1 year is 18,519.2, which after 2 years is 20.5, which after 3 years, the cost just goes up.
Okay. Any other questions that you guys can think of?
Mayor, this is Heather.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that we have invited the city's Historic Preservation Commission members to this meeting, as well as the Historic Main Street Board to attend. There's a number of state agency representatives on the line as well. And so it would be a good opportunity for any of our local board members, if they have comments, to make comments so that everyone hears their thoughts regarding this proposal, and it presents a great opportunity for everyone to have this discussion.
Okay, then let's open it up for any discussion from anybody that is listening in. Any questions? From any of the,
This is Myron Fly. The only thing I would say is, and he highlighted it just there at the end, timely decisions, especially in this environment, are crucial, especially when you talk about cost savings. So we appreciate everything that you all are doing to move this project forward as quick as we can. So thank you.
okay, thank you, Milo. Any other questions?
Have we dealt with all the chat questions that are down there?
I think the latest one was from Historic Preservation, thanking for the invite.
Okay. Anybody from the Historic Preservation Group have any particular comments that they would like to comment on?
I'm with the Historic Preservation Commission, Jana Remington. You answered most of the questions I had, but I just wanted to say that I'm impressed with the emphasis on true historic preservation in this project. I can tell from listening to Mr. Gregory that is always on the top of their minds, even though there's extremely complicated issues of modernization. And we appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick comment. This is Elizabeth Kelly, also from the Historic Preservation Commission, and thank you all so much. A lot to learn and to consider. I think particularly, and I won't expect an answer at this point, but exploring this issue of the marquee and restoring, the front, the street front to the Rapp Brothers design is a big question in my mind, and something I think is really important. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope we can be involved and be part of this process going forward.
One thing I like about the marquee is that they're considering taking the current marquee that's there and moving it over to the new addition, which would keep the old one or restore the old one, but keep the
Right.
one and still keep it. I think that's really a good idea.
Agreed.
Any other questions or comments? Guess not. Thank you for your.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Chris Bowles. I'm the Director of Preservation Incentives Programs at History Colorado. I don't have any comments to make specifically about this because I believe we're in ongoing discussions. But I did want to thank Gregory and thank yourselves for allowing us the opportunity to listen to this today. There was a lot of really good information.
Really want to thank you for your interest and participation. Well, there's no further discussion. Thank you for the presentation tonight and the questions, and we will move forward with the project. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to item number 2, which is our incentive discussion.
Can we take 5 for a minute?
Take 5? Okay, I guess we have a request to take about a 5-minute break, so let's do that and then we'll come back.
last meeting, who went?
I'm going now too.
I really like the new addition. I think that actually it energizes the space.
Yes.
I'm amazed that there's 25 feet there, because before that question was asked, I was like, I gotta go down there with the tape and see how wide that is, because it looked much
But
bigger.
you know, when he talks about the ramp, and I didn't wanna take too much time because it was an extensive presentation anyway,
No,
but
Joel.
that ramp's gotta be,
I'm
No,
sorry, I was
that
hoping
whole-
we could mute. They can hear everything, and I mean, that's okay.
You just walk up and hit the bottom left button that says mute, and then when we're done, then Mike can turn it back on.
But then we can't talk about anything.
Unmute.
Unmute.
We can't talk about anything for now.
Uh-oh, now you hung up.
Oh, did I?
Damn it, I don't know.
yes,
What I think is they're gonna bring that up to street level at the first part. And so the ramp in the handicap area that goes to the elevators, then you will be able to access every level from there. That's the way I
You're not supposed to
interpreted
be
the picture.
talking though.
well, I could
I
say
think we
one-
can. No, you absolutely could. I
It's just a work session, so we're not making
Right.
no
We were
decision.
I
talking
know,
about
I know. It kind of is violating.
Let's
Hey,
just wait, let's
I
just wait
could-
till we're back on record.
Yeah, good idea.
I can attest to the fact that those seats are very comfortable. I spent most of my youth in those seats.
They
Yeah,
are
but we were a hell of a lot smaller when we sat in them seats.
No, I wasn't, I was about the same.
They don't have a big kid, they was
What?
the same seats
What?
and they are.
I just remember feeling really cramped in there,
But
and you had to kind of step over people to get to it.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Is Aaron okay? Pardon? Aaron Williamson, is he okay?
Yes, I have a feeling these 5 o'clocks are hard for him to get to.
No, he's having issues.
Yeah, an issue from work, so he'll see his doctor Thursday, and then they should release him for everything.
Did he get hurt?
Yeah.
A while back, remember when he got smacked in the head with that damn piece of pipe?
Yeah.
So he's having,
He could have been killed, it just
Yeah.
happened to hit him where it just did some damage. but-
yeah. So that's all it is, the doctor told him.
That's
to
all it
stay
is,
home.
he could have died.
Yeah, he just could have died. Some rode motorcycles for how many
Very
years? He
easily.
could have died every day.
Pretty close,
Yeah,
yeah.
a bunch
Told me
of
about
times.
it, I was like, have you gone to a neurologist? I was like, what are you not doing at the emergency room with the neurologist?
Yeah, I know, but one time I kind of.
Hey, Les
my feet up there,
messed up the Zoom
this
meeting.
way, I had a flashlight. Oh, way to go, Les.
I had a teacher in
Still have an indentation.
5th grade because I wasn't sitting straight at this, my foot was out, and walked up and stomped on my foot and stuff back in them days. I said some choice things, then he slapped me. And so the next day my dad come to school. My dad was, but he worked for the Searcy family out of Arizona. He knew about Trinidad way back in the heydays. He used to do some work for them. So he went to school the next day. And so then it was bad, so. But it was terrible. But that's just the kind of guy he was. He didn't give a crap about nothing. He was
Big statue.
he was only about 6'1". I'm the biggest, but he was mean.
Really?
Yeah, he was just mean.
We definitely need to
He's the one who
have
taught me
that
how
line
to survive
reinstalled there.
the hard life. My mom taught me to be a sloth spirit.
That sounds.
So at least I got both, yeah.
You guys know.
He was Navy just like me, but he's been gone for, pushing 30 years now.
No, they can't.
But we'd be on
They can't
vacation
change that.
somewhere and he'd
They
get a
can't
phone
change the
call and
seating.
it was like,
That's
June,
the
he'd
box
just
back.
be gone.
Well, because it's stepped.
Yeah.
It's stepped and the seats are
Exactly.
back across. There's no way they could do that.
Yeah. I don't even know if you could
I see.
You can't, the seats are full
Yeah.
get a little bit.
He basically
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
for money, every vote for money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, because I took them before I fixed
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way
Yeah,
you
when I told
can
him,
move those
I would
backwards over
steer.
the aisles.
You guys are still being recorded, so.
They were gonna do, they had an outfit out of, Indiana. Mike did, when he was living there. This was a few years ago when he was there. They were gonna take those seats out and have them refinished and redone, which would have made them more comfortable because they would have recushioned them and cleaned them up. But again, he didn't have the money to do it.
So, I really, that's why I made that, because I remember, I think that entire move forward just slowed down.
But it's stepped.
35,
The
40
seats are
minutes.
they're back against a step on each other.
So
They'd have to
Well,
get a whole floor out.
we're gonna have a lot of questions about something.
Is that the original clock?
Because it's, it comes down, you want to step, so the seats are back against, so you can't move the seats back.
Well, they look at it.
I mean, that changing the seats out there is about the only thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of those need to be worked on too.
I've been up
Do
there.
something like that.
Mike, are you guys gonna be on the screen again?
Recording in progress.
No,
No? Okay.
no, nothing,
Okay.
nothing presenting, I don't think.
It, I just whacked myself.
I know.
Ready?
Already, I guess,
Oh,
that's
yes.
the only one, but he'll come in.
It's not
So
Here he
that
comes now.
There he goes.
Fox thing's over with?
Yes.
Comes the master litigator.
Sorry.
You wanna put your camera
Okay, we are now back in session for
Sure.
item number 2, which is the incentive discussion. And as we and council have been discussing for a few months now, with the current situation that we have with housing in the city, the cost of building homes, whether it's a single family home or multi-family homes, the cost has gone up astronomically. Builders, developers, they are looking for some sort of incentives to try to reduce some of their costs. So from that issue has come about that for us to consider maybe some incentives. In our packet, there were some thoughts, not really some thoughts necessarily, but some information for us to consider. Hopefully, as we go through our discussion tonight, that we might come out with maybe some sort of a plan of what we can offer developers. I think that's what Mr. Valentine and his crew are looking for, so or at least a beginning. So, Mr. Valentine, why don't you go ahead and give us some information that you might have?
Sure, thank you, Mayor, and, so what I put together in the packet, are some of the fees that we charge, like the development review fees for, minor subdivisions, variances, zonings, annexations, and those are all there, and really, in the whole scheme of things for a builder, those are minimal. And then, the whole, chapter out of our development, community comprehensive plan is in there just on the housing. Also included was an ordinance that we have already on the books for incentives, but it really doesn't spell out much. It says we're here to give incentives and we'll help, but it doesn't spell it out. So, in your packet is also the utility service charges, and I apologize I didn't look before, but this is only for like a standard 3/4 inch tap, water tap for a house, single family house. Well, in our ordinances, a 3/4 inch tap is $12.50. If it's outside, it's $3,200, and it goes all the way down to, if we get a big housing development, a 2-inch tap is $4,000. If it's outside the city limits, it's $9,500. if we get a really big unit of taps, 4-inch tap is 12,500. Extraterritorial is 37.5. The point is, so, oh, and also I put in the building, department fee schedule, and it goes up to $500,000, and that charges for a $500,000 building cost is $3,827. With all those added up, I'm not sure how much of an incentive it is in today's day and age for a builder to come and, you know, it helps, definitely helps them and kind of takes that on, but does it bring in the builder? Me and Wally's on here and he could add, but we spoke to, if any of you went to the SCED meeting, Michael Yerman, he's on here, I believe. Yeah, he's there. And we kind of met with him. He's done affordable housing in Salida, in Crested Butte, and now is working out east on affordable housing. He's talking to incentivize $1 million, to incentivize like a 10-unit property. So are we doing anything? I'll just say this, I checked with Cheryl today, and we have in our sales tax, you know, where we've set it aside for incentives, we have $153,000. So staff is struggling with putting together, you know, and you know, great. Somebody's gonna come in, we're thinking, okay, do we incentivize one? I don't think so. That's just a home. It's gotta be, we're thinking like 5 units. Whether it's an apartment, a condo, 5 homes would be kind of the start. And with that, Wally, I don't know if you want to add anything, or if Michael, you can lend us some of your expertise in this discussion, that would be great.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll just add that into what Mike said there. We think that this would be a nice incentive to developers who are looking to work with Trinidad and create a partnership with them and covering some of these fees. The thing about it is a lot of these, and all of these are ones specifically the city is charging. And when we're starting to talk about larger apartment complexes and stuff like that, we have to bring out our outside consultants who also charge their own fees to all of this too. So it wouldn't, but in any means, completely like subsidize the broccoli costs as they've been called to me by other people in this housing incentive world. But it's still just something nice we can do to the developers that, like Mike said, if they're building more than 4 units, we imagine that they're in the business of providing housing, not in the business of creating their own customized home for themselves or for groups of people they may be working with. And really, I think pushes people to think that they should be building more housing. However, the biggest thing is, like Mike said, it's pretty minimal savings in the whole scope of building homes. And so that's why we've been talking with Michael at SCED about some of the ideas that he has in his experience in doing housing projects in different communities that have gone through similar growth spurts as Trinidad is going through right now. The thing is, Trinidad has a unique position right now because of the marijuana sales tax revenue that we've collected and just the reserves that we have built up. I know that we necessarily don't want to get into those for anything, but it would be good to explore options of how we can use that to help bring housing developers here in this crucial time that we need more housing and when costs of building have skyrocketed way beyond what they've ever been before. So I'll let Michael share some of his ideas, ask some questions of you all, and we'll get this conversation going.
Before we turn it over to Michael, Wally, it was a bill that was introduced in the last couple of days, I'm not sure where it's going at this point in time, where there was gonna be some money out there for, housing, acquisition, other things. I don't know if we could apply for some money like that to add to our total that we have now, to increase it. I don't know, that would be something I think to look into. Because it seems like a lot of this money that is floating out there from not only the state but the federal government, there is some flexibility to a lot of these funds. So I think that would be something to look into.
If I may, Mayor, so part of the fear, and maybe Michael mentioned this, a lot of that funding is based on AMI, the average medium income, and if it's tied to that, we're gonna build, for like the space grade, hard to find the working people to move into those because they don't qualify, they make too much, so that's part of it, so I'm trying to monitor that along with everything else, but go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, Mike, you're correct on that. There's no such thing as free money, especially when it comes to housing. And I think what Trinidad and what I've heard through my couple days, again, I don't want to come in and act like I know Trinidad or can speak to every issue that you have. But we, for instance, we're working on a 60-unit development in the southeastern plains, trying to take into account the economies of scale. And doing a dispersed project while at least delivering enough units where we realize savings in material costs and labor costs. And the subsidy of that, we're currently, and again, this is very much a draft, is in about a $500,000 range to drive down the cost to the point where and again, I'm going to contradict myself, but getting in that 80 to 120% AMI range, which isn't funded by any state or federal government program, but is still affordable for that workforce that we're all talking about. And it might even go up to 200% AMI, as it did for me in Crested Butte. But when you start talking about teachers, your medical professionals, your police officers, it's folks that we would all deem essential to having a functional community. They're going to be outside of those AMI caps. And I think, in hearing the initial discussions is how do we really create a housing market in which we're really targeting that workforce housing is what I always deem it as, and driving down those costs that right now keeps them out of the fair market. Trinidad is on the precipice of what I would deem, almost going to the full-scale housing model that is basically Crested Butte, in that you guys are just getting to that price point of over $300,000 for the single families where you could be making $70,000 or $80,000 a year and still not being able to access that free market. And when you start to get into that, you got to start thinking about how you create an incentive package and what you're trying to get. One thing I will warn the council and Mayor Rico, what I'm not talking about is handouts. I personally, I'm a fiscal conservative, and so I'm not here to preach that you guys need to just throw money at the problem. Actually, I think you need to think about how you get a quick flow and what you're getting in back for the money that you put in. They just
froze. Well, we're still alive, but he froze.
Yeah, we're alive.
Scared you were yeah.
Let's see.
You didn't touch a thing.
I didn't touch a thing,
My own
just sensed it.
It might be their internet.
Barbara, is that us? Oh.
It is.
Well, you let him know. She said it's us.
Oh.
Does anybody have the meeting ID?
Here it is, Mike.
Well, I gotta get there first.
Benjamin.
We can read it to you. You ready?
Go.
920-2102.
Wait.
Sorry.
2102, sorry.
No, 8549. You have the passcode?
I will need it.
Okay. 908418.
Boy, this is fun, ain't it?
Yeah, baby.
Is that sarcasm?
Recording in progress.
We're back.
Okay, sorry, Michael.
No problem.
We're back.
Great. Sorry, I don't know where I lost you, but I'll start back on the. What I will tell you is that everything we're discussing here, I would not say is a handout, and I wouldn't look at this as a handout, and I don't think your development community would look at this as a handout. So what I'm about to say, the amount, Mike, I know you said I said $1 million. I don't know if that's the correct amount, but I do want to say that if the council starts thinking about, my presentations that I used to give and what I kind of was able to do in Crested View was build without LIHTC. My first project was a LIHTC project, and that's why I'm bald. I haven't, after that first project, I didn't touch LIHTC funds again. And we also ran into the same issues that I think Space to Create went up against, which was that 60% AMI cap really excluded some folks that you probably wanted to house. And I think that's important to realize that, with the low-income housing tax credits, there are going to be those AMI caps, and also with some of the state funds. Now, I know SHAPA and DOLA have pushed up the affordability limits, and there is some talk about home ownership limits even going up to 80 or 120% AMI. So there is hope there that might work. The one observation I'll share with the council, and then I'll be quiet, is that in each community across the 13 counties we serve, housing is the #1 issue. That I walk into any room, it is in Chaffey County they just declared a housing emergency. So regardless of where I'm at, it is a situation, and in each region the solution is different. The one thing that was unique in that I saw in Trinidad is that, and because of your historic district and because of some of the buildings that are existing, the brick and mortar, and also because of the value that your community has placed on historic preservation and preservation of those structures, you guys have the framework to actually tackle rental housing in a really, really unique way. And what I would ask the council is to think about real quick, when you think about incentives, to think about how much if the city were to go out and build a unit, how much that would cost. And when you think about that cost, when you provide that development incentive, you should be getting a quick quote for that, not at an equal value, but of a percentage of what that cost would be. And there's things that you could do that, that prevents this from just being what I would probably deem as a handout, in that you should be looking to how do you get things in return for the incentive. So if you were to incentivize, and I don't want to use the $1 million number, but let's because it's a round number, let's use $1 million. How many units would the city expect to get back, or what kind of things would you want in return for that incentive to occur? And when you talk about rental projects, which are nearly impossible to build without LIHTC, you start talking about, would the developer be willing to, for a certain percentage of units, do rent control? And rent control is actually illegal in the state of Colorado. However, a developer can actually agree contractually with the city of Trinidad to do rent and set rental prices at a certain rate if they are given an incentive. So there are things like that you could potentially look at. I'd also say that you guys have people that you would deem essential employees that should be given priority when units and projects are developed. And if they're given that incentive, can we look to ways to make sure that there are certain numbers of units that get incentives that target essential employees and set certain price points so that they're able to access that market with. And again, the whole point of why this government intervention is needed in the housing market is because your housing costs have gotten too high, and you're trying to drive down that cost to get your workforce back into that market. So, again, I would be willing to, talk in a little bit more detail about this. engage the city. You know, SCED is in a unique space in that we are a nonprofit, in that Los Angeles County pays dues into our organization, so we're able to do these types of smaller projects at a discount. And so again, as we discuss this in further detail, we're certainly happy to provide assistance, to provide technical assistance, or do whatever else we can. But again, I think Trinidad is really a unique circumstance in several ways, especially as we start talking about how to incentivize housing.
Hey, Mike, this is Phil. You're talking that Chaffa and DOLA were thinking of changing that AMI. How serious do you think they are about that?
My honest opinion, or the hopefulness?
Give us both.
Honest opinion.
You know, I will say this: DOLA and Chaffa have worked really hard. At the state and the Division of Housing did a listening tour. I think it was about a year and a half ago. I attended 3 different sessions. I drove for one of them all the way to Durango from Crested View, and I talked about these different incentives. The issue, I really think, and the federal funds are really, those funds are directed at a HUD, and HUD sets those standards. And what Colorado always faces up against is that, you know, where I'm from originally in Pittsburgh or Ohio, those AMIs and the pricing disparity in housing aren't so extreme. And when you take the country as a whole, it really, for hot housing markets like in Colorado, it really makes it tough for us to meet those national standards when they attach AMIs. So I hope that they might increase it to 120%. And again, as you start talking about incentives for home ownership, there are different ways to tackle that. And I think, you know, I will applaud the city. Those broccoli costs, they do go. I know that I share Mike's concerns that they're probably not enough. And what you, at the end of the day, you know, in Crested View, we actually had that same incentive where we would pay tap fees, but we got a deed restriction in exchange for that. I don't think there's enough meat on that bone to ask for a deed restriction right now. But if you're to provide additional incentives, what kind of things could you do? And deed restrictions, the other part of that conversation is a deed restriction can have a price appreciation cap on a high extreme end to all just being about occupancy and ensuring it's a permanent resident on the low end of a deed restriction. So, you know, how much of a deed restriction do you want on a property, and how big is the incentive? You know, agreeing to rent, agreeing to actual units going back to town and city employees or school district employees for rental units and projects. You know, those are the types of incentives or quick flow that you should be getting for your incentive. And I think you'll find willing developers if there's enough meat to get them through some of the painstaking process it is to get some of that construction financing.
One final question, Mike, before I turn it over to the rest of the council. Is there any designation difference? Because, you know, we're considered frontier rather than just plain rural. Is there any difference that you know of?
For as it relates to the housing programs?
Yeah.
You know, there isn't, and not in my experience. You know, again, our region in Chaffee is more, you know, almost getting to the resort community status, and so I don't see any differentiation amongst the programs that I've seen. But again, there is hope. But even when we talked with the Division of Housing on the potential of, I don't want to put words. I do not represent the Division of Housing or DOLA or Chaffa, so I'll be clear there. You know, when we talked to the Division of Housing about potentially going to 80 or 120%, they did state that, you know, their funding would be about $15,000 per unit on the back end. So there is still a big gap that, you know, local communities are having to come to the table with. And like I said, you know, beyond the utility costs, the other things to keep in mind are, you know, things that we're talking about as it relates to the project on the Southeastern Plains. We're talking about surveying, engineering, design costs, also going into that, legal costs, preparing, contracts, and helping with real estate commissions through lotteries and pre-sales. I mean, so those are all other ways that housing can be assisted to also help drive down costs.
Turn it over to council, Mr. Goodall.
Crickets. What a mess of a problem that we have. I think we need to definitely stick that $167,000 in the incentives fund. That's first and second quarter put together.
That's,
Just
one,
for-
153, 244. That is, if you remember when we started it, we had 87,000 or so. That was, we said we'll start with that as seed money, and then we went through 2 quarters, and it amounts up to 153.
Then we talked about that additional
$100,000.
That's not,
I thought it
yeah.
was, yeah.
correct.
But it still just puts us at $250,000. I think we still need to focus when we set how we're gonna do this on definitely no less than 4 to 5 units and up, and adjust our scale from there. We're never gonna, I think, I can't say never, by next year we could be looking at having a substantial amount of money, but I don't see anyone beating down the door right now to wanna start building tomorrow anyway. So I think we need to focus on incentivizing 5 units and up. Definitely cover the fees, permits, taps, stuff along them lines as a start. As the funds build up, then we can look at offering more money for possibly bigger developments. I still think something that would be very beneficial to this community would be a senior living facility where some of the people in this community could move into that would free up their housing to go into the market. And I don't know if we have a way of looking or getting any input back from people in the community that would be interested in moving into that type of facility. That would add houses to the market right away. So, that's the only ideals I've got right now.
Mr. DeBono.
Well, besides the common incentives like expedited permitting and fee waiver reductions, how about possibly a density bonus which permits developers to increase the maximum allowable development on a property in exchange for helping the city achieve public policy goals?
We do have a bit of a density. In our land use code, we do have some flexibility for affordable housing and density. Sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but yes. No.
Oh my God. Good thing your evaluation's not there.
Is that kind of answer your question? Yeah. He's like,
Yeah.
Ms. Reagan, what do you have?
Oh, well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and Michael kind of reaffirmed some of the questions I have about incentives. I really am not really, as you all know, 100% for incentives. I think we need to let the market do what the market does best, adjust and fluctuate with supply and demand. But there's 2 things, and Michael mentioned, and both Michaels, Valentine as well. We don't have enough in there to make a difference. We really don't, and I think, this is not unique to Trinidad. The whole country is experiencing this problem. And when Rusty mentioned about senior housing, for the first time in at least a year, the Housing Authority is advertising for tenants. So
Wow.
that segment of the community, I feel their needs are being met. We have the middle of the road, middle class people is usually that get hit the hardest. What I would really like to do, if we do anything with incentives, list it as a pilot program. Let's try it as a pilot program, not entrench it in our budget to the point where we can't back out. Number one, I think we should do that. I really think the 5-unit minimum is essential. But what I'd really, really like to do is, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of our problem in Trinidad right now is we can't get a city planner. Is that?
That's part of it, yes, I mean,
Okay.
and maybe it's because they can't afford housing, I don't.
Mike, let me jump on there. As a former city planner, the only reason I was able to move to Crescent Butte is because they provided me housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads me to my idea. Instead of using that money to incentivize people to build a house, why don't we use that money to get somebody in here that will help us plan? And regardless of what the market does, it's gonna fluctuate. Everybody you talk to said it is fluctuating. The whole country is reshuffling because of the pandemic. And I can see it downtown because I'm in the business where you see the transactions. I'm Italian, I gotta talk to my kids, I apologize. But you can see the ebb and flow of the housing market here in Trinidad. I can see where people have been holding on to houses because it wasn't economically feasible for them to sell that house. Because when you pay capital gains, and then if you're on a limited income Medicare, then your Medicare payments go up because your income goes up. So I don't think incentives is the answer for Trinidad. I think we need to get a professional in here to help us. I think there's a lot of empty lots that are usable, that are recyclable for the city of Trinidad. I see it a lot. I go through town and say, man, that would be a good building site. And if we have to use that money to get a city planner down here, I think that's the answer to our question, our problem. And I think what we need to do is use that money, good, bad, or indifferent, whatever happens to the housing in Trinidad, that we have a plan in place that's going to be rock solid regardless of what the economy does.
I got a question for you. Don't you think the fact that we have a mind opening up and the possibility of expanding by the end of the year, doubling employees, and again next year puts us in a unique situation? We're a little more pressed for housing. I don't think there's a lot of communities that are in the same position we are with a large company wanting to come in and bring in that many employees. I think it changes things a little for us.
Well, if you look, Rusty, in the paper, the mine now is asking for temp help.
Well, they're offering to pay people to move here, pay to help them get a house, put them up in housing.
Right, but what I'm saying is the conditions that exist in Trinidad now, with free enterprise as it is, supply and demand, people are now letting go of housing. You talked about grandfather housing. There are people that have inherited houses that it's cheaper for them to sit there and let that house rot than try to fix it up, sell it in 2 or 3 years ago market, because your profit would be minimum at most. Now it's at the point where people can invest some money in these homes and really get a substantial investment back on their property.
That's true.
That's my opinion.
Several issues that, sorry, man, I just jumped in there, but the cost of materials is what's, they sat on it before because it wasn't, now it's feasible, but they gotta buy all the material costs and that's up, so it's crazy. The other thing is, when me and Wally sat down with Michael, we said, you know what, you kinda got some good ideas, can you put together a scope and we may be able to utilize you through SCED,
Exactly.
to help us with this. So,
We need to identify these lots in town that are buildable.
Well, you do bring that, as a matter of fact, one of the things that was some of the information that you gave us, and it's in our comprehensive plan, when they came out with that, they said the city has an abundance of undeveloped land. Where? That's a question.
Cougar Canyon, Eagle Rock,
Okay.
That's where they were identifying.
yes.
That was.
And so those are tied up in myriad of issues that
Well,
we're trying.
I think Michael makes a point, I think maybe we could use his services.
Right.
And another thing I'd like for you to consider is if we can't get a permanent planner, can we get somebody to contract with to get them down here to help us at least until we can? Because I think we're really lacking there.
Mike, is that a thing for you?
I trust me. I already tried to talk him into it, but he muted himself.
He's like,
I dropped the call. Another point. Go ahead.
No, I think, I first and foremost, I would just tell you that what you're experiencing in Trinidad is, I am seeing across each of the counties I serve. And I think, to a lot of the points made, I would be more than willing to engage the council. This is what we do. And to kind of lay out a process in which we get to from A to Z on this discussion and really come out with some strategic actions. I am not and we're not the company to provide you with a coffee table book that's not what I'm going to be coming to town to do. It'll be actually to sit down and look at A, land use policies, and B, also looking at what are the actual goals of what a successful housing economy looks like in Trinidad, and then trying to look at, I always like to figure out what the root issues are and then work from there and solving and working at that level before going up with a full scale incentive program. I know Wally, you just released a housing needs assessment. Again, we're not the firm to do that, but that needs assessment is essential to the work I would help you with, in that it's going to give me the numbers and it's going to give me the data on the ground. I think the folks in that room are knowledgeable enough to know what your community is about and what's currently the market forces going on in your community. And then I wouldn't look past the one lifelong lesson that I will tell everybody in the room are rentals are impossible to build. LIHTC has been the only way I've seen rental housing go up across the state in the last 5 years. And again, you're looking at those rental caps. What I will tell you is that the one thing that I was most impressed upon is that I think Trinidad is in a place that could actually crack that egg and actually provide solutions through an incentive program to get those brick and mortar buildings that are just quintessential Trinidad back up in service and servicing that segment of the community. I think if you see the rental community loosen up a little bit and there be some more availability in rentals, I think the major employer that you just talked about is going to need those kind of projects moving forward. And then beyond that, I also think when we talk about construction and labor costs associated with construction, it's not just materials right now. It's also getting a contractor to show up and actually do the project. I'm sure that's probably a big issue there too, beyond material costs. And it's the same issue I'm dealing with in a project in the Southeastern Plains. Is a project large enough that it's going to keep the labor busy enough that it warrants being in the community for that 3 to 6 months it's going to take to get a project done. So those are the types of things that I would like to talk through the council. I don't know, Mike, I look to you. Is the most appropriate thing for us to chat? And, I apologize. I haven't gotten back to you on a scope of services, but I'd be happy to sit down with you and Wally and talk through that. Is that the next step here?
Definitely from my perspective.
Yeah.
Ms. Ogletree, do you have any?
I'm sorry.
You have a question?
I just want to thank you, Michael, because you said something to me that just hit right to my heart. Financially conservative. You know, with tax money, we have to be, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I, you know, even every time we put money into a project in Crescent View, we got a return. You know, there was a community benefit that came back, and it was normally in the form of a deed restriction, or it was in the form of a rental agreement that ensured that workforce employees were able to afford rental rates when the project was completed. Those are the types of quick foreclosures that we should be discussing if I come to town about how to use your incentive funds to actually result in units for your workforce on the back end. And I couldn't agree with you more. You know, handouts or incentives really need to have enough of an incentive to actually attract a developer and enough of a payback to make it worth the city engaging in that activity.
Thank you.
So,
I've been curious to find out where we are on the housing needs assessment. Do we have any kind of estimated time of arrival when we might have that? Molly or Mike?
There's a 3 to 6 month timeline in the contract, but we haven't gotten the bids in yet.
Okay.
We're putting that out this weekend.
That's what I've
We
always
will-
thought, whenever we are talking about incentives, I'm thinking we need to make that smart money, not, oh gosh, I think this will help if we do this.
Right.
So I think we absolutely need that in order to engage Michael to do what he wants to do and to help us to make a wise decision about how to use the money effectively. I think in the meantime that the city can be doing other things that don't cost money, perhaps, like making sure the entire development department is as easy to work with as possible for developers. I have had feedback from people who've come and said, I want to do this, and I just got all these roadblocks and unreasonable kinds of responses, and I think that's an area that we really, as a city, have to put our best foot forward to developers. If we want them to be here doing the work, we should do that. And also thinking about where in our comprehensive plan, and this is something I'm sure Michael would look at, where do we want these things to happen? Is there an area that we want to say, this is where we're gonna incentivize projects because this is where we want infill to happen? Those are the things that I think, those are those high level kind of questions that I think we as a city can be thinking about in the meantime.
Ms. Ogletree, you mentioned that, you know, there are some people that have talked to you and have run into some roadblocks. Do you have any particular roadblocks that you have heard from people that they've run into?
I think it's more of an attitude of inflexibility that they've gotten, that it's like, well, this is what it says, so if you can't do that, there should be more of a give and take and more of an engagement with someone higher up, or whoever can make a decision about it that doesn't require a variance or to require more formal action. But I think we could do that. We can, as a city.
I think what really controls that, but I think that's where we get into that issue of, you know, we have a comprehensive plan, you have codes that we gotta follow, and people's, a lot of times, expectations are greater, I think sometimes, and they expect more than what they're actually.
Sure
I
they
think that's
do,
probably-
sure they do.
And if I could, please, rule enforcement can be unpopular. And people don't always want to hear what we have to say. And it's something, I understand exactly what you're saying, like the roof pitch issue. I know that's a huge thing for people, and I hear about that all the time. It's just, it's unpopular to enforce rules. And so I get it, and I know people would really like more flexibility, but it's tough when that's what you're doing and you're saying these are the rules, and I'm sorry, but this is what we have to do. And I, again, know.
There's one thing that we gotta be careful of, some of these things is setting precedents, you know.
I get it, but I think these are all questions we need to ask ourselves
Yes.
about those rules. Are those rules the way that we have them written? Are they important to be written that way? I mean, I'm a rule follower, and I agree, and I like things laid out so everybody knows what they can expect, and don't think I've got to know the right person to get this thing done. But I think we need to ask ourselves, is our land use code written in a way that is receptive to growth or not?
So I would say that our new land use code that we just passed last year had been through planning and zoning for 3 years, through council for 2 years, through all those processes, and we got to a point where we said, okay, this is good, and we passed it. So now our staff is saying, okay, this is what everybody wants. So I agree that there's gotta be some flexibility to a point, but that, I think, while our development team is, you know, 2 people right now, you know, administrator who doesn't have a planner to ask, and our building code official, and so it's kind of like,
So
well,
we're
this is what it
understaffed.
says,
That's
so,
where
um,
we're really
I've been trying hard to get a planner.
I guess the biggest, one of the things is that if you know of specific items that people are having issues with, you know, write them down, bring them to Mike.
I do,
Yeah,
I do,
so that-
I do,
so
but I
that
don't,
if
that's
there's-
not what, I don't think that's my job. Honestly, I don't think that as a city council member, I'm supposed to be sitting and fix this
No,
situation.
just to bring it to the attention, see,
Right.
these are the questions that we're getting is, is there any flexibility with any of these?
Yeah.
We could take that up.
Well, I think maybe it's time we should invite Carrie McCool or involve her in a meeting and talk about the issues that we're having, cause that's our consultant and everything else. And I know everyone would like everything black and white, but there's that gray area nobody wants to walk in, and we need to visit that, and I agree. We don't need to set a precedence for sure, but, we're gonna have to do something
We
to
need to
make it
know.
more appealing.
We need to know what those items are in order to
Well,
approach it.
and I do, because I've already contacted Carrie,
Me too.
she was
And I
too
told her to
busy.
contact you.
Yeah, she's already, you know, on board with some of the issues, 612 roof pitch, building size, ADU size, lot size. Those are all things that are coming up now that weren't before COVID.
Yeah.
Now we hit COVID, and for some reason we had a housing crunch, so I don't know if it's, you know, the coast moving into us or what, but, so it's all in process.
And having worked with her at P&Z for so long, I did ask her, look at where our utilities are in what parts of town that would be best to build in and to provide you with that. If we had to do expansion or, there goes the brain, it just wanders off.
Utility extensions and stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
not so much where we have utilities at where, to bring stuff into the city limits.
Sure.
Annexation, there we go, I knew it'd come back eventually, thank you. But I did ask her to look at if we had certain areas that were utilities were easiest to get to, where annexation would be the easiest for us to do. So, me and Carrie have been friends a long time, so I call her every now and then to just say hey, and I asked her if she would look into that.
Any other questions, Ms. Ogletree?
I think that, yes, I wanna be fiscally conservative too, I hopefully am always that, but I also think that there are times like this where you're in a regional statewide crisis, that it's okay for the city to come in like it has done in Crested Butte and to identify, this is what we wanna help, this is how we wanna address this. I think that's appropriate use of tax money.
Yes.
Anything else?
Nope, that's
Mr.
it.
Schuler?
I don't know, I think a lot of the issue is we're limited because of the city limits, and we don't have, and I know we do have some land and stuff for building, but we really don't. We have an area, I was thinking out here, that was supposed to, and I'm not sure the name, is it Eagle Rock out here by, where the Eckhart School area is?
Yes.
You know, I mean, I'm just throwing this out. Wouldn't it be advisable for us to get some of that land there and develop it? I mean, we already have utilities there, and if we had some roads in that and we had the lots, that would be a real incentive for people to come and build where you can get a group of houses put in. Because it's a big enough area. I don't know what the cost is or what it would be amount, but maybe that's something that we need to really look to expand our city limits and bring stuff into the town and annex it, like Rusty was saying. And that's an easy area to have because it's really developed when we got the Fisher's Peak Park, we got the road going up there, the roundabout, we got everything in that area, and we are running our utilities up there.
Rezone that, drop the lot sizes, would make more lots available, because that's the problem, the lot sizes up there are huge in that development.
Yeah.
And that other small development, they are so just, and I don't wanna get too far in the weeds.
Right.
That is being marketed by Collier International for, Mutual of Omaha Bank. I've met with several people, there's an offer in on that land right now, contingent on a few things, they're working through it. There are some utilities there, but they would be very costly. There was a possibility of a nursing home going in there, and just the one road was gonna cost $1 million, so, we can work with the developer when they come to it, but, yeah, there's some,
Wasn't there's a bond there
yes,
And
that's
did
on 11 lots.
on 11 lots, and didn't we put some money with that out of the marijuana money we needed to spend
No,
before?
no,
We didn't?
We did.
no,
I thought we did too.
it's directed. We directed those funds because they were just sitting there for Eagle Rock. And when we directed the funds, we directed 300,000 basically to Eagle Rock. And that's the money that's in escrow sitting there. It's not enough to finish what was there, so. Anyway.
Michael, this is Phil. One of the questions I had is, you said you worked with Crested Butte on the project. It'd be interesting to see what kind of incentives they provided, and did they provide, like you mentioned, $1 billion or whatever to start the process, or what do you know about that?
So, I know all 101 units that I accomplished and got constructed over a 6-year period, when there was probably about 10 different kinds of incentives we used, and all different forms and fashions to create those. The one thing, that I will say, and I hear this discussion going on, the one thing to keep in mind is not one single project is going to solve all of your housing problems. And so, for instance, Eagle Rock, even if you were able to get, say for instance, in the perfect world, the city got your hands on those lots and you put out an RFQ and you were able to take land costs and utility costs out of the equation, and the only thing that the buyer had to buy on the back end was the vertical costs and the final sales price, and that final sales price equated to something that they could afford, right? What you're dealing with in that model right there is for sale ownership workforce housing. And different models like ADUs, what you're dealing with is creating rental availability in your single family home district. And so every project or every incentive is going to have to target different housing issues. And so I think what would be a really important discussion with the council is, what are all the issues, and then what are your top priorities, and to use those incentive packages to tackle those top priorities. I did tour Cougar Canyon, and I understand some of the title issues around Eagle's Nest. Those I will say that the housing market at a certain point, the economics of that will unravel those legal issues to the point where it's the incentive is enough to make a profit for a developer. But one thing that you did throw out there that was another different incentive that we use in Crested Butte is called land banking, and that is a huge piece of the puzzle. Is actually finding pieces of land that the city either currently owns or is able to get under contract and own feasible title to take land costs out of the development equation. That also helps drive down and lower costs at the back end, whether it's a rental project or the final pass through to the consumer. But again, when you do provide those incentives, the bigger policy discussion that the council needs to have is, what is the quid pro quo? Is it a deed restriction? Maybe a deed restriction isn't appropriate for Trinidad and the local lenders, and maybe they'll get hives when they see a deed restriction on a property. But what is going to protect that unit to ensure that a local workforce is continually in that unit as you provide those types of different things? But I think there was 3 or 4 different ideas and development that all run parallel to each other, but all tackle different elements of the housing issues that we're dealing with. Does that make sense?
It does, and one last thing that I can think of that has not been discussed is every community has areas that are desirable to want to live in and areas that are undesirable. So I think putting houses in some areas that may not be undesirable, the cost there versus the areas that are desirable, I think that is an issue that I think people and developers will also look at. So that's an interesting, but it's true.
It is true.
Yeah, a lot on Colorado compared to out on North Avenue, I mean, big difference.
So I think that, anyway, so through this discussion, I'm not sure if we've given you much to go on.
A lot to go on. I definitely would like to sit with.
Yep.
I think that's the start.
Michael and come up with some thoughts and put together a plan. And yeah, just
That with the market survey and
Right.
the housing survey, I think are 2 important factors.
Right. And it's, of course, it's never happening fast enough.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter.
One thing I just wanted to bring up real quick, that I saw was a building height maximum, and it said something about 15 feet.
No,
I'm not sure.
depending on the zones, I think it's 25 foot or through 2 stories, and then in a commercial, it's 5 stories or 50 feet, something like that.
I saw some.
What it was saying is that one of the incentives in our code is that you can get a height bonus of 15 feet higher than typically is.
Oh, okay.
That must be what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
So anyway, like I said, I guess that's just the basic starting point to sit down with Michael and see if you guys can come up with some beginning ideas.
And the whole thing, and I've said this many times, developers aren't breaking down our doors. They're busy doing what they're doing, and they're making money. So it's not like they're saying, hey, what can the city do to help?
Right. And I look that there will be a change in that. The building materials is very cyclical. Building is very cyclical. We see all this building going on in the metro areas, but a lot of people are moving out of the metro areas, which is going to create, I think, a glut in their markets, which I think will eventually move down to some of the rural areas. So I think that some of that's it may take a little more time, but I think it will happen. And I think that the costs, labor costs probably won't change. Material costs may come down some because they're just astronomical right now because they can.
Right.
Coming from that market, the mills take advantage when they can. That's what they do.
Well, I think this is definitely a long-term plan. We're not looking for an immediate solution. We're working towards a long-term plan, I feel, and that's what's important.
Exactly. Any other thoughts?
I do have just one question. Do we want to continue moving forward with the idea of cutting down on these broccoli costs, the tap fees? As we've said, I don't know if that will be deplete what's in our account and all to support people, but it's something that we might be able to do sooner than later, just to offer some sort of assistance from the city and getting development moving.
Well, I'll give you something that I put together here real quick. I looked at, for instance, a 2,000 square foot house. The cost of to go to the building department, it was like $1,700 just for that. The engineering may vary a little bit. It was $1,500 for a sewer tap fee. Gas was $100, and the water was $19.22. And of course, in there was a $592 meter component. So the total was $52.56. But if you take out I feel that the component cost should be paid for anyhow. So if you took that out, it's close to $5,000 is all for that size of a house.
So, and it's, okay, somebody comes in and says, I'm building one house. Are we giving them that incentive?
Exactly.
We're getting no bang for that buck
Right.
No.
at all.
It has to be, I think,
So if someone come in and build, 5 units, they get 25 grand. It's not a whole lot of money, but.
Well, I still think that those decisions are based on what is our housing needs assessment? Do we need single family housing? Maybe we need that more than 4 duplexes or whatever. I don't know. We don't know.
Talking to a couple of the realtors that I know, there's people want both. I mean, it just depends. They do want single family, but they also want multiple.
Well, what scares me about this, if we start doing broadly incentives like Wallen mentioned, if we start it, we benefit 5 people and then we stop it. That's not a good procedure. And the second thing I'm worried about in that situation, okay, we give them that incentive. Who benefits? The person that's building the house or the person that's buying it? Do you think the buyer is gonna pass that savings on to the owner?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Only if you get a rent control agreement between the developer and the owner.
I had one other thought when I was looking at the code. Does our code define what we mean by affordable?
no.
Okay.
There's affordable, there's marketable, what, so that's a good point, it does not.
I really believe that from past experience, affordable housing is non-existent. That's my take, because I've seen it. That's what I see. But I mean, all these incentives and all this money to drive down the costs, to tax credits and all that stuff may help, but for someone to just go out and build, and just to say I'm gonna build affordable housing and get a return on it, it's impossible.
Well, that's a sad note.
Well,
It's a good observation.
I don't think Wally got the answer he's looking for.
I think they need to be, Wally, I think they need to be in the consideration.
Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, the main reason I was just asking is just to know what my action items are to do next. It sounds like at this point it's the housing needs assessment and continue having conversations about what best fits our community. But yeah, I know there are a lot of people that want us to move forward with this. So if you all wanted me to, I just wanted to check. So
Are we having anybody who's asking for something in particular? If they're coming to you and saying, I'd like to do this development, but here's the part of it that I can't do, can the city help? Are you getting any questions like that?
no, I'm literally getting people calling me and asking, what will the city do for me? Almost everyone who calls, they say, I'm interested in developing something, what will the city give me to help me?
That's right.
I had one developer that called me in particular and asked that same question, what's available?
Well, I think it's actually a valuable question, but I think it's, in terms of negotiating that kind of thing, you have to understand, do we need what they're offering, or do we not? That's
the point, they're not offering, they're just saying, maybe I have an idea, and they'll even tell you the idea, what can the city do for me?
Well, then you say, I need to know your idea.
And,
Well, let me offer just a little bit of, because I don't like leaving things in a complete limbo when I have these conversations. And so let me give a quick 2-minute synopsis of what I've heard tonight, and also what's the next step to move forward. How about that?
Good.
Does that sound good? It sounds like there needs to be a discussion with the council, with knowing that there's a parallel track going with the needs assessment that hopefully will give us clarity to what the council in that discussion would deem are the root problems. And again, housing is such a broad subject that there's no one problem. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 problems that we're going to identify, and then while that conversation is going on and we're setting priorities with the council and understanding truly what your goals and potential outcomes, hopefully at that point the housing assessment is being completed and actually gives us the data that would support what goals we would go after. From there, what I would suggest we do is to have a community conversation, knowing in the background what our goals are, and to talk to the development community, hey, rental is a goal, or affordable workforce housing at a certain price point is a goal. What will it take to get a unit built at, I'm just throwing out a number, $180,000? And set those goals and have that conversation precisely around what the council thinks are the priorities. And then from there, develop a program with that input from the community, bring it back to the council. And again, I will stress this again, you're not going to solve every problem. I hate to break the news. But what you can do is pick the top 2 or 3 of priorities that the council will want to go through with this incentive and say, these are our incentives and this is the program that are tackling these 3 goals. And try to progress it from there. Establish a funding stream, make sure there's equity, equality and equity as far as how the process is run and how it is offered to the community and the development community. And then also look at things like land banking and how we establish, certain protocols that ensure that, the only other big piece of advice I have is that once you go out and you do these programs, you're going to need an organization, and I know there's a housing authority in there, but is it structured currently to ensure that things like lotteries or pre-sales are being done in a way that ensures that there's transparency and that there's equal access to that land or to that incentive when the buyer or the renter comes in at the end of a project. So if that sounds and I'm happy to hear feedback on that suggestion, because this is definitely shooting from the hip there. But again, working with Wally, I know we got 3 to 6 months before the needs assessments comes out. So I would suggest that we look to July or August to get me in town to sit down and schedule an hour, 2-hour work session with the council to really get into the nitty-gritty of what these goals are, and then from there expand the process into a little bit more of a listening session that hopefully that will also help inform the needs assessment, and then come back to you by the end of the year with some hopefully some program recommendations. Does that sound like a feasible idea to the council?
It sounds like it would be a good idea. One last thing is, prior to the needs assessment, you said about maybe talking to some of the community to see what the needs are actually. Would that be talking to realtors or bankers or who?
Well, it depends on. I'm sorry to answer a question with a question, and I hate doing that. But the question I have for the council is, what are your goals? Because that's going to inform who I'm asking the questions to. Because if it's rental, it's one community, one group of developers community. If it's home ownership, it's a whole different group. If you're deeming, what are the priorities of our essential workforce? Am I talking to the community college, the school districts, the medical center? That's really going to inform who we invite, because it really is. I always call it the process of discovery, in which you understand the actual issues at play and what are the barriers that are keeping developers from hitting and solving those market issues. And so I would like to, again, I need to be informed by the council, and it's really important to me to make sure that your goals are always out there in front, that's what we're working towards. These are the issues we're trying to solve, because unfortunately, you're not going to solve them all, so we need to prioritize which ones we want to work towards. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and to come up with a real good plan, we have to wait for that needs assessment. We're looking at probably 6 months plus before we can actually come out with that plan. So it's going to be
I can tell you this, that I don't need the needs assessment to get going. And so I think, again, the conversations, I know what the needs assessment, what functionally is in a needs assessment, and I know what data is going to come back to me that is important to inform. And the data that's going to be important are going to be price points, AMI, underserved AMI categories, and potential job growth and creation, and basically the number of units you need to create in the next 10, well, it'll probably be the next 3 years that you need to hit. And those are going to be the absorption rates and things that are going to inform what kind of scale and magnitude of a project we're looking at. But the goals that the council has and the issues, and the potential of what are we trying, what is the size of the pie we're trying to bite off, those are questions we can start talking about ahead of the needs assessment. Does that make sense?
Any other questions from council?
Nope.
Michael, thank you for listening in tonight and giving us some advice. Mr. Valentine, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
See what you come up with. Okay.
Mike, I'll be in touch. Well, I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Does council have any other thoughts of any other discussion items for the future for work sessions, or we kind of sit with what we've got so far? Okay.
I have ideas, but I think we have too much.
That's good.
Couple things, Mayor. Number one, I have here a support letter. The city of Raton is going for a grant to buy a 2,226 acre parcel of land that adjoins the west side of Sugar Eat, Canyon State Park. It's known as the Bartlett Mesa Ranch, and it would also adjoin with Fisher's Peak. So they have requested a letter of support, and we have one here with all the signatures. I guess we'll have to get Aaron's. If you don't mind, I think it's a good project, and it just expands on the.
They've been talking about that for a while.
Yeah, and they're trying to get a grant, so it's a letter to the senators over in New Mexico. Just a reminder that this Thursday we have the river visioning work session. Basically, the open house up at the community center. It's from 4:30 to 6 on June the 10th. And then lastly, I'm going to have to be off June 17th through the 22nd. So that work session is, if you want to have one, I'll do it remotely. And we've scheduled a retreat, or I have, for July 12th. Amongst all this stuff is getting that going. So if you see any issues with that, so
July the 12th, you said?
July 12th, and we're trying to work towards streamlining it. After council discussion, we'll do our best to get that out there. That's all I have.
Okay. I do have a couple of items real quick. This is for you, Mr. Valentine. The Southwest Chief Commission, we're still considering going after that raise grant.
Oh.
And if we do, we'll have to use our portal, and of course, you'll be the grant administrator.
Okay.
Just to let you know. The second thing that's coming up, and because I got bit a few nights ago with mosquitoes. Last year, at the end of the year, we talked about an environmentally safe mosquito control. Were you guys able to come up with anything? And when would it start?
The most environmentally safe is education, having people, dump out any water that's freestanding. We've had this discussion today, and as a matter of fact, I talked to Mr. Shu today on it. While I was in Bob's office talking about putting, the donuts that stop the mosquitoes, the larvicide, stop them from hatching, the pellets that you throw in the, like the cattails over there, we've got those coming. The insecticide, which is the fogger and kills the live mosquitoes, we haven't ordered the 2020, I can't remember the name of it yet. We're trying to find something. We've had many calls in both camps don't spray near me, I don't want that stuff, and when are you going to spray?
Yeah.
So, it's,
Had somebody call me the other
yeah,
Well, you know,
for spray or for not spray.
I don't know, that was interesting last year, had some people that actually wrote a letter, I think, one of them.
Oh, yeah,
But
they
they
wrote
never-
and sent
they never-
research.
But they never did give us a name of a
Well, they,
environmentally controlled or environmentally safe pesticide.
right. They brought in some paperwork and I left it with the previous public works director. Bob is looking for that packet. We know who those ladies were. We're kind of working through it. We don't think the health department or the county are gonna spray this year. So, it's all rolled in there. The whole reason for spraying initially 10 years ago, 12 years ago was West Nile, the West
Yeah.
Nile scare. So, that's kind of subsided, but, yeah.
Anyway, I thought I'd bring it up because I said that a bit a few nights ago. It was like, overnight, they just, poof, they
Yeah,
were out full force the next morning.
they hatch.
Anyway, thank you for for the conversation tonight. It was pretty in-depth. Thank you.
Thank you.
This guy, his recall, issue comes up, boom, out of the park, boom. I mean, really. Yeah, way to go, Michael.
Yeah, well.
Walking